Did you ever get the question, if you were an animal, which animal would you be at an interview? How about if you could be Batman or Robin? Who would you choose to be and why?
How would I describe myself? 3 words. Hardworking, alpha male, jackhammer, merciless.
If you're going for an interview, you're going to be subjected to tests, cases, and personality questionnaires. They can make or break whether or not you get the job. There are 3 big questions. What do these tests actually do? How much of it is junk? And how do you prepare and deal with these tests? You've got essentially 3 buckets of tests out there. Personality tests try to assess your behavior, your traits, and your way of working and working with others in a work environment. Intelligence tests, which are just that, they attempt to understand some sort of version of your brain processing power. And work aptitude tests or simulations, they test specific skills needed for specific jobs.
All right, don't tell me. Decaf cappuccino for Joey. Coffee black. Latte. And an iced tea. I'm getting pretty good at this.
Excellent. That's
Good for me.
If you're going to work as a waiter, one of the best ways to test your waitering skills is to give you a test shift. You work for 1 or 2 nights and the manager watches whether or not you did a good job or not. That's a work aptitude test. Now, if you're a software engineer, you might be asked to write or review some code and explain how it works. If you're a management consultant, you'll be asked to solve a case like what is the market for wearable devices in the United States.
So for today's case, you actually have a maker of Botox that is considering expanding into the migraine market. And they've already begun clinical trials in this area. The product is expected to receive FDA approval at the end of the year, and your team has been hired to assess the viability of the product launch. So essentially the question is, how would you determine if Botox company should enter the migraine market?
Depending on the job, the aptitude tests can be super specific, like the waitering example, or more theoretical, like the management consultant example. Some jobs are more easily tested in a real-world environment where others approximate a work sample. Without getting into the details of what an intelligence test is and whether or not it's actual intelligence, just to stick to the point that intelligence tests are usually made up of a couple of different questions. There's different types of mathematical questions, and you know them when you see them. It's if 2 trains leave at the same time and they move at different speeds, when will they cross paths? They are logic-based questions, so John is taller than Joe, Joe is smaller than Mary, Mary was born before John, so who has green hair? They can also be diagrammatic questions, and these are the ones you know from what you typically associate with real IQ tests. So it's circle, square, triangle, and what's the next object in the row. There are a lot of versions of these tests, but the thing they usually have in common is that there is a time limit and a total number of problems that you have to get through.
I always gave this problem to kids. I'm thinking of a number between 1 and 100. You can guess. After each guess, I'll tell you whether high or low. You get it the first guess, I'll give you $5, $4, 3, 2, 1, 0. You pay me $1, you pay me 2, you pay me 3. And the question is, do you want to play or not? What's your answer?
Your score gets compared to some statistically comparable group, and how you do compared to them is an approximation of your relative general processing capacity.
Well, look, I already told you. I deal with the goddamn customers so the engineers don't have to. I have people skills. I am good at dealing with people. Can't you understand that? What the hell is wrong with you people?
Lastly, you've got personality tests. There are a million of them, and usually they have 3 styles of questions. You're either asked to rank yourself on a scale relative to a question, so on a scale of 1 to 10, how outgoing do you see yourself? Or you're asked to choose. I prefer A, to hang out with friends, B, get things done, or C, think about difficult problems. Or you're asked to rank those 3 things in order of importance for you. Again, your scores are compared to some sort of norm group, and your behavior or traits are compared relative to this norm group. The result will say something about whether you are more or less extroverted than most people, more or less detail-orientated than most people, or you are more or less prone to get stressed out than most people. Since you made it this far, I really hope you consider subscribing to the channel. I'm Mike. I have an extensive background from pharma, tech, and consulting. I've held C-level roles in international companies, and I have a degree in human resources, psychology, and also in business. On this channel, you will get the advice on how to navigate careers and also understand how businesses do the work that they do. So if you enjoy that kind of stuff, if you're enjoying this content, please consider subscribing. Thanks a ton. But there's a lot of junk out there. These tests, when they're good, are really, really useful. But when used incorrectly, they have two big potential problems. Problem one is they're sometimes really badly designed and they're not testing what the company actually thinks it's testing. And problem number two is the conclusions drawn from the results are wrong. So asking someone to take a shift as a waiter is a pretty good way of checking whether or not they have the skills to work as a waiter. But try designing a case for a lawyer to solve. I mean, you can't simulate a courtroom. You could have them write some sort of position paper and research some sort of case, but they could cheat or they could use AI. And whether or not they're good at writing doesn't necessarily mean they'll be good in a courtroom if they're going to be litigation lawyers.
I always gave this problem to kids. I'm thinking of a number between 1 and 100. You can guess. After each guess, I'll tell you whether high or low. You get it the first guess, I'll give you $5, $4, 3, 2, 1, 0. You pay me $1, you pay me 2, you pay me 3. And the question is, do you want to play or not? What's your answer?
An intelligence test, which is built around a lot of math, will require math education. It won't test actual intelligence because math skill is a prerequisite to be able to do the test. Even logical questions can be problematic because if the questions are in English and English isn't your first language, you're going to be at a disadvantage no matter how smart you are. And as for personality tests, they are sometimes a result of really junk science. Rorschach tests in job interviews has happened and it's an absolute nightmare. Picking superheroes, and if there's one place where the risk of being put through absolute useless garbage, it's personality tests. Even being put through something like a Jung or a Myers-Briggs test is going to lead to really bad hiring decisions. And even when the test is good, it can still lead to wrong conclusions. Take the example of a store salesperson. Do they need to be extroverts? I would argue that they don't have to, but some manager might assume that extroversion is really important to work in a store. That would potentially lead to a wrong conclusion.
They never filled out. The most critical part of the interview, at least to my mind, was when we finally decided we liked them enough to show them the Macintosh prototype. And then we sat them down in front of it. And if they just kind of were bored or said, this is a nice computer, we didn't want it. We wanted their eyes to light up and them to get really excited. And then we knew they were one of us.
And here's a question for you. Are all software engineers highly detail-orientated? No. Companies also have a higher risk towards a higher score in intelligence, even when it's not necessary. And being good at solving cases doesn't necessarily guarantee you of being good at consulting. Plus, solving cases also takes experience that can be learned. My personal favorite example of this is politics. People vote for people based on how well they campaign, not based on how well they govern, at least not initially. And the skill of campaigning is different to the skill of governing. So just because somebody does well at one thing leads you to a wrong conclusion, potentially, in terms of how they govern. The reality is that these tools, when used correctly, are useful for a company, but they're not perfect tools. Fortunately for you, that means you can, in a good way, manipulate these tests a little bit to your advantage through preparation and understanding how to navigate them. For work aptitude tests and simulations, you need to consider beforehand what the test is, testing. I told you that they are trying to figure out if you can do the job, but there is a scale. On the one end is the waiter test, which clearly is a test of your experience doing the job. But a case interview is at the other end. It's not testing how you work under pressure. It's testing how you think. This is important because when you're given a test at the end of the scale, like the waiter test, you just need to do the job and do it well. Write the code, write the work sample, create a graphic design, showcase your work. And on the other end, with the consulting examples, it's not about showcasing your work. It's about explaining your reasoning. Where did you start? Which steps did you go through to get to the conclusion? The further along this scale you go, the more you have to be able to demonstrate structure, logic, process, and critical thinking. And, of course, your ability to communicate those things. Answering the question is not about the case answer. It's the steps you went through to get to the answer. For intelligence tests, almost all experts will say that you can't affect your results in these tests. Your intelligence is your intelligence, fluid or crystallized or whatever. But my experience says that it's not entirely true. If you've never taken any of these intelligence type tests before, you won't be comfortable with those question types. So going online and taking and retaking every practice test you can possibly take will give you an advantage. And to that end, I've left some links to tests in the description below that you can use. Not all of them are great, but they give you some good exercise. The more you get comfortable with the tests, the better. You won't necessarily improve your results massively, but you might get 2 or 3 or 4 more correct answers out of 50, and that can make all the difference. And when you take these tests, prioritize speed. If you get stuck on a problem, move on. Often you have something like 12 minutes for 50 questions. Getting stuck on a single problem will hurt your result. And also, make sure you're not disturbed. Your frat bro friend playing God of War on PlayStation 5 in the background is not going to improve your results. When it's personality tests, ask what the test is. Get the specific name of the test. Research it. Almost all legitimate providers have practice tests so you can be comfortable with the test. These tests are hugely different in variety. Some of them have 64 personality factors, some of them have 4. But most of the reputable ones confirm to a personality theory called the Big Five. You might have heard of it because it has an acronym, OCEAN. Openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism, or sometimes called emotional stability. These are 5 categories and a scale where you are more or less of each of these traits. I've also linked to some info on this in the description as well. If there's just 3 things you need to be mindful about these categories, it's the following. Think about a job and consider what you think a typical person's traits would be like. Is a creative designer going to have high openness to ideas or low openness to ideas? Is a person working as an air traffic controller going to be very emotionally stable or the opposite? Having an idea, and it's not really that hard, of what a typical employee might have of traits is good to have in mind when answering the questionnaire. And also, no matter the job, every employer loves employees that are conscientious and emotionally stable. If you're going to try and influence the results just a teeny tiny bit, those are the 2 categories to be mindful of. 3, the tests usually have built-in checks for manipulation. They focus on consistency of answers. The more you diverge and are inconsistent, the more it will assume that you're cheating. Now you can use this to your advantage. So here are 4 questions. What I want you to do in your head is just rank them as most or least descriptive of you. So 1, 2, 3, 4. You work hard until the job is completely done. You value learning new things. You enjoy social activities. You're easily stressed out. The first question is about conscientiousness. Learning new things is about openness. The social question is about extroversion. And the last question is about emotional stability. 9 times out of 10, I'd put conscientiousness at the top. I'd consistently put stress as least me. And I'd be consistent with that throughout the test. Now, I don't suggest you try to manipulate a test completely because that's both going to be incredibly hard because there are too many factors, and also you're just lying and they're going to expect a different employee to show up on the day of work. But being mindful of the test and maybe reordering things a little bit is generally to your advantage. There's a risk that you go to an interview at some company that wants you to read a Rorschach test. If they do, stay the heck away. Do your research, and if they put you through a test that isn't reputable or serious or just relevant to the goal, then stay away from that company. It's a red flag. If they are using a reputable test, then you can stack the deck. These tests are not really that scary. Aptitude tests can be practiced, and you need to work on your ability to be able to explain your reasoning and your methods. For intelligence tests, practice will help you a little. And in reality, if the manager likes you, they will likely let you through if you're just in the ballpark of the range that they're looking for. And personality tests, the reality is that they rarely disqualify you. Most good recruiters know that there are different ways to solve a job and different personalities contribute with different things. But if you're going to stack the deck on personality, then pump that conscientiousness factor a little bit and hold back on showcasing how easily you get nervous or stressed out. And then do your best. You will be fine. See you soon.